being. So what do you define as spirituality, and how do you feel maybe spirituality is coming as a whole through all the interviews you've seen on Collective Frequency?
You asked a very, very tough question, because I don't intend, and I don't even think I have the capacity to define spirituality. And it was interesting to hear the dictionary's attempt at defining spirituality, simply because it let me know just exactly how short the attempts to define it have been so far. What it comes down to, really, this is, of course, the way I see spirituality. It's based on the fact that I have the perception that a human being, we all know what a being is, it's something that just is, but a human is a very unique creature. It is a creature that is simultaneously physical and spiritual. So, consequently, because a human has a physicality and a spirituality, everything that is related to this other part that most people don't even fully understand or acknowledge, this thing called spirit, everything that has anything to do with that is spirituality. So really, spirituality for me is everything that is related to that part of a human that makes a human what it is. Because if it wasn't for the spirit aspect of a human would just be a man. And I define that as just a physical creature that has all the physical characteristics of hunger and thirst and emotions and drives and all of those physical things. But a human is also spirit. Now, tending to that aspect of the human, everything that tends to that, everything that is not man, is spiritual. Now we've opened the gate pretty wide, pretty far. So yes, religion is included, because religion is an aspect of the human's being. It is a part of his spiritual existence. But it doesn't just stop there. It is more than just religion, because then there's, what about metaphysical relationships? How do ghosts play into that? Well, of course, they play into it perfectly. Ghosts and the things that go bump in the night are part of spirituality, because they don't have physical characteristics. They're not manifest. They're not man. They fall into the range of the realm of spirituality. Now that's just to get things started. Did you get kind of, can you follow that kind of line of thinking?
Yeah, no, I totally feel like, maybe from what you just said, that maybe humans are really the only people that can cross over from the spirit realm and the human reality realm. Now, I've always thought that spirituality was whatever you kind of held sacred in your life. Maybe you're an apple farmer, so your apples that's your spiritual essence, because that's what you work your entire life for. But I also see spirituality as it's like the outer shell of who you are, and I think the more deeper part of who you are is your more soulful state, which I feel like your soulful state kind of transcends deeper into the universe, connecting you on a more deeper level with yourself, but also with the universe. And like whether you believe in past lives or not, maybe that's that piece of information that travels with you. Like it's that energy body.
Exactly. And see, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to open up the concept of spirituality to include concepts like past lives, concepts that are beyond the physical realm, and just wanted to widen the thing beyond just religion, because religion is sort of documented or codified spirituality. In other words, religions are the written down expressions or summarizations of some great person's spiritual awareness. Usually, what you have in a religion is you have somebody known as a prophet or a saint or something in that order that had a spiritual experience. In other words, they became aware of the fact that they were more than just a physical existence. They became aware of that, what you call the outer aspect of themselves, and realized there was more to them than just physicality. And in the course of their existence, or we'll call it their lifetime, they espoused their observations about on this subject and their musings on it. And their listeners then, of course, realizing that something unusual is going on here, have taken notes on it and then documented it. And then later on, after that aware individual passes, everybody kind of gravitates to following that documentation of this individual, of this being's spiritual experience. So it gets locked into a form, and it doesn't really move from that form, because the people who don't have awareness of their outer form, i.e. their spirituality, their only connection to their outer form, or as you said, spirituality, is through the awareness that this other individual had. But spirituality should be the realm or the domain of every human. In fact, it is. There are no humans that do not have an outer form. Because as I defined it in the beginning, a human is a unique symbiosis of man and hue. And man being, of course, the physicality, and the hue being the spirit. So every human has spirit. They're just not aware of it. And in some ways, religion can get in the way of recognizing one's own spirituality, because you then connect, or this poor being connects to their spirituality through the codified remembrances of somebody else's spiritual awarenesses, instead of looking to find their own. So they take this shortcut of following a documented spiritual experience instead of looking for that within themselves. And maybe it's partially because they don't recognize or realize, or they've never been told, that they have spirit too. And if they just paid a little more attention to becoming aware of it, they too could be prophets or have a spiritual experience, or at least maybe not as grand as the grand prophet, because let's face it, they did have something a little bit more than the average. But the average human being is a prophet in their own right. And actually their spiritual awareness is the right spiritual awareness for them. Trying to live the spiritual awareness of the Buddha is probably a bad fit for most human beings, for most humans, because he was different. He was special. He had a different nervous system. He had a different culture that he was born in. A lot of circumstances went into having this individual become aware of a particular spirituality that was his uniquely, and it fit for him. It was perfect for him because it was his. But anybody else can have a spiritual awakening, and their spiritual awakening is the right one for them. And it is, in fact, the only right one for them. Trying to put on somebody else's spiritual awakening or awareness is like trying to put on somebody else's clothes. They might be too big, or they might be too small. And it's better to try to find your own spirituality because it fits you. And it's not right to compare it. That's another thing humans love to do. They love to compare. Oh, my spirituality is better than your spirituality. Or my religion is better than your religion. And, well, okay, so, your prophet had this spiritual awareness and my prophet had this spiritual awareness. But, they were right for them at their time and their place and their character. But this better thing doesn't work. In fact, it doesn't even apply really to you. Your spirituality is even better than both of those two or the others because it's the one that matches you.
Yeah. And see, I feel like every action you do it's spiritual, because you should do something because you want to do it, and if you're doing it for, dare I say, the greater good for yourself, then yeah, you're becoming more spiritual in the sense that, yeah, you're becoming you. You're allowing yourself to become more whole, and you're putting aside everything else that you can intake as a negativity. And just like I like to tell people, you should always meditate in everything you do. Being aware is the most important thing you can do, just being a being, whether you're a human being or just a creature being. But I feel that these prophets like Buddha or Jesus or Saint Arnold, Muhammad, Krishna, like, you're right, people documented them and expanded on, but it was because they allowed their own personal road to spirituality or connecting to their soulful state to be able to allow it to work for them because it is them. And so people saw that and were like, wow, I want to do that. And so instead of becoming, like you said, becoming their own person, they try to shortcut and just be like, oh, it worked for them, it should work for me. Like, if you're a tall person, you probably shouldn't be driving, a VW Bug, because it might be a little difficult for you because it's a small car, and it's interesting how we travel in our vehicles, our human bodies, our creature bodies, spirit bodies, soul bodies, how we travel from place to place. And yeah, we make it a competition when it's not. It's a race. That it's a race if we want it to be a race for ourselves and nobody else.
Yes, it has no real time limit. See, that's the thing, is if you really believe, if you really come to grips with the concept of spirit and spirituality, by definition, spirit is that aspect of a human, there's that word again, of a human that doesn't follow the characteristics of the materiality. The materiality has a definitive beginning and a very definitive end, but the hue aspect of a human does not have a beginning or an end. So there is no time concept at all. There is no point in trying to get it all done in the time span of the man portion of the human. I mean, okay, so you live 100 years and you don't get to your full awareness. Well, in spirituality, you have the concept of maybe reincarnation or further advancement in another form, or just the evolution of spirit in itself out in the spirit world. So it continues, because spirit, by definition, is not like material world. It lasts forever. It has it's impermeable. No, it is permanent. There you go. Man is permeable. Has permeability. The material world ends, but not spirituality, and that is what makes spirituality unique. And the mad dash that I have seen in others in trying to get to be as spiritual as the Buddha, or as spiritual as Jesus, or as spiritual as Krishna, or as spiritual as any one of the other documented spiritual beings is pointless, because maybe even in the course of the whole existence of your spirit, you're not going to get there. I mean, let's face it, these are unique beings, and maybe even unique spirits. You're probably a unique spirit too. And in the world of spirituality, there is no higher or lower or any of that. It is a color. Who's to say that green is more beautiful than blue or red? It's not. Green is just green. It has its own characteristic. And so your spiritual color, it may not be the same as the Buddha or as the Krishna or the others, but it is a color, and it is unique, and it is as beautiful and wonderful as any one of those others. And perhaps, if somebody wrote it down, and it could become a religion too, because if you really, really get in touch with your spiritual essence, and you finally come to grips with the fact that you might actually have some permanence, and that is beyond the material world, you probably will start acting in a very, very special way too. But of course, nobody ever told you that. They told you that you would become spirit after you die. Well, the truth is, you were spirit before you were born. You're going to be spirit after your body dies. But the spirit didn't just leave when you were born. Yeah. It just, your attention and focus became your attention became focused on your material aspect. And that's the only difference. But you're just as spiritual during your physical life as you were before it, and as you are going to be afterward.
And it's like when people ask, like, oh, well, like, don't you want to go to heaven, blah, blah, blah. Well, why can't you have heaven on earth? Like, your daily life, your daily moments should be heaven all the time if you're in your complete realm of you being you,
Oh, wow, did you ever open a can of worms? I remember somebody asked one time, well, where do we go definitively when we die? Do we go to heaven, or do we go to hell? Do you have any kind of answer for me on that question? And I said, here's what I said. I said, I was approached one time by a Christian fellow who asked me, he knowing that I was not a Christian and that I was a spiritualist, asked me if I wanted to go to heaven to be with Jesus. And I replied, no, I don't want to go to be with Jesus. When I leave this physical consciousness, I want to go and be with my friends and relatives and ancestors where they're at. And the reason I said that is because here's the thing. We create in our lifetime our heavens and our hell. Actually, we don't create heavens, or we don't create both of those. We create our afterlife. So you create your afterlife during your life by creating the concept of what your afterlife is going to be. You start impressing on your spirit what you're going to get in the afterlife. And so when you leave your physicality, your spirit impressed with all of this keyed in data about what the afterlife is going to be like. You go to that because now you're in your spirit form. You don't have the capacity for manifestation because you're in spirit where there is no manifestation, there is no materiality. So the spirit then is sort of caught in the impressions that were pressed into it during the period when it was in a realm where it could get impressions and material and ideas and concepts. So during the course of your life, you will create your afterlife. So I am creating in my life an afterlife of being with friends, family, and relatives, and on all of that. Now, because I am Native American, we have a concept of the afterlife, and we call the afterlife other side camp. So when I leave this physical manifestation, I'm going to go camp with my ancestors in other side camp. Now, when this Christian man dies, he's going to go to heaven, and you know what? He's going to be with Jesus. Now, that's fine. He set himself up for that. But in all honesty, I don't want to be with the guy because I don't relate to Jesus in any way, shape, or form. He was a Middle Eastern mystic that, had a lot of concepts and ideas that weren't anywhere near mine or close to mine. And so why would I want to hang out with that guy and his friends? I want to hang out with my people and my kind of people, my kind of friends, and it's what I'll do if I set it up. This guy is setting up to go to heaven and hang out with Jesus. That's exactly what he's going to do because his spirit has been impressed with those concepts and those ideas. And that is why actually we get stuck ghosts. There are some people that when they leave their material world, it happens so suddenly, or it catches them so off guard, they don't really recognize that they're dead, and the only thing they've impressed on themselves is their life. And so they go through repeating their life over and over and over. So they do a lot of the same things in the afterlife that they did in their in their regular life. Kind of reminds me of a story my father told me when I was a young man. He talked about a house that his family lived in that was haunted. And he said that on certain day of the month, there would be a ghost that would come, and you could hear all the noises, but you couldn't see a thing. He said there was a ghost that would come up to the back door. It would open the door. It would go into the kitchen, and it would pull pots and pans out of the cupboard, and it would start the process of making dinner and all of that. And you could hear all the noises. And there was nothing to be seen. It was just this ghost going through the actions that he had done while he was still alive. He used to come home from the farm or the ranch or wherever he worked. This is back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Anyway, he was probably a rancher or a farmer. He gets home and he's preparing himself his dinner. But he's been doing this now for 100 years or more, because this is the only thing that it was imprinted into his spirit. And so he was sort of until I guess that cycle finally wears out, and he was, I don't know how long these impressions last, but that was his heaven. His heaven was reliving the life that he had known when he was still alive. And this is a lot of the case of ghosts. There's another funny part about this, and probably will get me in deep hot water. But anyway, my parents called a priest one time to exorcise this ghost, right? Because he's a nuisance, you know. He keeps you up till 3 in the morning or whatever on that particular day. So the priest comes and he's ready. He's standing there in front of the door with his holy water and all ready to go. And you can hear the ghost coming from. He walks from the outside and he goes through the door. And the priest starts his, Domine Providence, like all that. And the ghost walks right through him, continues into the kitchen, and starts preparing his dinner, just like all of that. The priest is like flabbergasted because he's just in the name of Jesus and blah, does the whole bit, and this thing doesn't even notice him. It just walks right through him, does its thing. The priest gets frustrated, packs his little black bag, and leaves. So it's like. Spirituality is a very, very deep thing. Like it involves the realm of ghosts and heaven and hell. And I feel sorry for those poor devils that actually created, in their life, they created a hell to go to in their afterlife.
Yeah.
But that is just as possible as creating a heaven.
Yeah. And maybe they like doing that. Because, like, with the ghost thing, when you're talking about the priests, I mean, it's possible he never understood that language. He could have been speaking English. Yeah, maybe the ghost was native, doesn't know English. Of course, it's not going to faze him, And at that point, I think humans are really the only ones that have created time, because I don't believe time is actually really real. So these ghosts keep going through these cycles until I think it finally clicks in their head and was like, oh, I could go do something else? Or why am I still doing this? I want to go do this now. And they, just materialize somewhere else.
Yeah, probably, heaven, even heaven runs out at some point. There is an end to it, or it's like, what, this isn't heaven anymore, or this isn't fun anymore.
If you think about it, you're eating like a nice chocolate cake, and you're like, yeah, it's so heavenly, and then you take the last bite, and heaven's over.